This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Hello and good afternoon. Can I welcome members, officers and members of the public here in the chamber or watching on the webcast to today's meeting of the Audit Panel. If you could just make sure your electronic devices are switched off or set to silent mode so they don't buzz and to avoid any unnecessary interruptions. Can I start by asking our clerk, Hannah Barlow, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you. Assembly Member Small Edwards with Assembly Member Ellie Baker as substitute.
Welcome, Assembly Member Baker. Not your first time on the audit panel. Definitely not. No. So before we begin, let me just welcome all of our guests who will be joining us at various parts of this afternoon's meeting. We have Faye Hammond, who's the Chief Finance Officer at the GLA. We have David Esling, who's the Head of Audit Assurance, Risk Management, MOPAC. We have Mark Woodley, Group Audit Lead for MOPAC. We have Stephen Reid, Partner and Head of UK Government and Public Sector Audit at EY. And Jacob McHugh, Senior Manager at EY. And we have Diane Tranmer, Executive Director of Corporate Resources and Business Improvement. Welcome, everyone. So can I ask, we've got a couple of bits of housekeeping before we get to our main business. So can I ask the panel to note the recommendations set out at item 2 regarding declarations of interest, and ask if members have any other interest to declare? Good. Items 3, 4 and 5, membership of panel, terms of reference and standing delegations. Can we note the panel's membership and chairing arrangements, its terms of reference and the standing delegations of authority to me as chairman as agreed by the London Assembly on the 6th of May 2025? Good, excellent. And item 6, minutes. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of March 2025 to be signed by me as a correct record? And finally, summary list of actions. Item 7, can I ask the panel to note the outstanding actions arising from its previous meeting and the additional correspondence received? Good, well noted, everyone. So now we move on to item 8, the external audit planning report. Can I welcome again Stephen Reid and Jacob McHugh from EY. Stephen, would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you very much. So the report before the panel this afternoon is the audit plan for 24-25. Before I pass to Jacob, just to highlight a few key aspects of the plan for the panel, I should say at this stage the plan is provisional, which is entirely appropriate and in line with prior years. And as I say, seeks to set out the approach that we intend to take in discharging our responsibilities to undertake the audit of the group financial statements for GLA for 24-25. With those introductory comments, let me pass to Jacob.
Thank you. If I can take you straight to page 6 of our report, or page 24 of your packs, I'll start by talking through the audit risks and just highlight a few of the other key matters and planning matters within our report. So on page 6, you'll see we have the presumed risk of management override of controls, which is a standard area of risk for any external audit engagement. We deem that to arise through the incorrect classification of capital spend and the risk of fraud in revenue recognition at LTLF. So these are due to management's unique position to be able to override existing controls within the organisation, and these risks are unchanged from the previous year. If I then take you on to the next page, you'll see our first area of new risk, which is around the transfer of London Stadium. And this is the move of, or the legal move of that entity and that LLP from LLDC into GLA Holdings. And given the transfer, we've therefore raised a significant risk there. We've also continued to hold significant risks around the E20 onerous contract provision, property valuations, and other valuations of non-current financial assets held at amortised cost. Again, none of those are new risks for the 24-25 financial year. Further risks which we've retained from previous year are the valuation of long-term debtors classified as fair value through profit and loss, the East Bank development provision, the valuation of investments held in funding London entities, the business rates appeals provision and pooling, pensions valuation as key areas of estimation within the financial statements that could therefore be subject to a material error if any of those assumptions were incorrect. We then have 2 further areas of inherent risk, the first of which being the group boundary assessment. So with a complex organisation and a complex group structure such as at the GLA, we have a risk around some of those assessments and key considerations in determining both the group boundary and then accounting for those within the group financial statements. You'll see in the column change from prior year, this is a reduction in risk level from the significant risk we reported previously. That significant risk was specific to the circumstances around LTLF in the 23-24 financial year, and we've therefore been able to reduce that to an inherent risk for this year. And finally, one other area of new risk is around the new leases standard, so IFRS 16. as a new standard for the GLA to adopt alongside the rest of government and public sector local bodies. This is an area of inherent risk due to the fact it is new, and therefore there is that risk of getting that slightly wrong, where there are new assets to bring onto balance sheet and new liabilities to recognise. So that's the risks. I'll then take you on to the next page, which is around our materiality level. And our materiality basis for this year, again, remains unchanged. So based on our provisional planning, which is based on the previous year's audited and signed financial statements, that's set at 70 million or 1% of prior year gross expenditure, and a performance materiality at 50%, so 35 million. That's at the lower end of the threshold due to a higher expectation of error across the group financial statements based on the number of misstatements we reported previously. If I then jump ahead to what is page 47 of your packs or page 29 of our report, this is our status of our value for money planning. As it says here, our value for money planning is underway and ongoing. One area we will look at closely is financial sustainability, both in terms of 24-25 outturn, but also as it's key for us to comment on the arrangements in the year. A key part of that would also be 25-26 budget setting, and we'll also look closely at those budget setting arrangements in the year. And then finally, if I just take you through to the timeline section of our report, which is page 61 of your packs or 43 of our report. In 23-24, we signed our opinion on the 28th of February 25, so of this year, which was in line with the backstop dates provided. For 24-25, the backstop date is 1 day earlier, so 27th of February 2026. However, we're really keen and clearly set on delivering an audit much closer to what is a traditional timeline, and reporting to this audit panel back in October, which would be right towards the conclusion of our audit, and we'd hope to conclude by the end of October as set out in the timeline here as well. So I think they are the key matters within this report, but happy to take any questions at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Harani.
I just want more detail on the new risk of the transfer of the London Stadium. So just looking at the paperwork, it says the risk is that the complex accounting implications of the transaction could be misinterpreted or incorrectly applied, leading to material misstatement in the group financial statements. Just want to sort of unpack that a bit and where the mistakes could occur in valuation and why that's such a, just looking at the grid as well, it's considered high risk and high probability.
So let me kick off. Thank you for the question. So as you'll be aware, GLA has taken the decision to transfer the ownership, and Faye can say more about that. Where there, a bit like last year with LTLF, where there was a change in group structure or a change in group entities, as auditors, it often leads us to consider that there is an increased risk there from the audit perspective that the transactions or the disclosures associated with that will be misstated, and particularly also because of the value of the numbers. We're dealing with large numbers as well, so that increases the audit risk of a material error making its way undetected into the financial statements. We have received a paper from officers, and we're working with officers on that. Officers took independent financial advice in relation to the transactions. So we're working through that at the current time with a view that we would like to be comfortable with that transaction, how it's been accounted for, and the disclosures associated with it well in advance of the October deadline.
Okay. And Faye, did you have anything to add on that?
Just that we recognise that it was a complex transaction. If you think about it, you've got the stadium at the moment sitting within LLDC's accounts, and obviously it needs to come out of LLDC's accounts and goes fundamentally is still the same, but actually there's complexities from an accounting point of view around that. And we took external advice, and as did LLDC, to make sure that we presented that appropriately. So we recognise it was a risk quite a while ago, and that's why we've taken action to get that in the right place.
Okay, I think I may have other questions separately on that, because I think naturally the stadium raises lots of questions here given the initial deal, but it's not for this forum.
Thanks very much. Actually, I had a question on a similar theme, actually, I suppose two. One is, I know in the past there's been some back and forth around the way that the LLDC assets were held. That, I think, is all now put to bed, and you're quite happy with that. I'll take your nodding as the answer to that question. Connected to that, obviously, what we've seen in terms of risk, what we've seen over the last couple of years, I suppose particularly post-pandemic, was really significant inflationary risk around particularly construction projects. And there are lots of bits of the GLA, including LLDC, OPDC, and TfL, and GLA itself, that have got various building and housing type projects underway. What's your view of how those risks are being managed?
So again, thank you. As Jacob said, one of the areas that we will be looking at is financial sustainability. So in terms of our value for money responsibilities, we focus on the arrangements which GLA has in place to across a number of dimensions, including, for example, governance and financial sustainability. So we haven't looked at that area yet. We will do that work as part of the audit for this year and report back. But in discussions with Faye, I am conscious that certainly Faye and the team are cognizant of those risks. And those risks, I guess, are pretty common across organisations such as GLA, albeit you are rather unique, but other large, complex local government bodies where they have significant capital programmes, and depending on how those contracts are constructed, who carries the risk in relation to those. So in the generality, it will be an area that we consider as part of financial sustainability and governance rather than in the detail of individual contracts, Chair.
And obviously, the reason I mention all the different elements of the GLA is obviously that those risks obviously are positively correlated in the sense that if we start seeing another round of significant building inflation, obviously all of those different areas will see all of that risk all happening at the same time. So you're happy that with the fact that that overall risk is being looked at, not just kind of siloed into each separate bit?
Yeah, the focus of our work will be around, so how is Faye and the team at the group level cited on the risks across the portfolio, and then what degree of flexibility is there, should those events occur, as you suggest, in terms of being able to turn the tap down or redirect resources from other areas to support, and what flexibility are there in the commitments?
Okay. I think I don't see any other questions on that. In that case, I think that I don't see anybody else itching to come in. So in that case, can I ask the panel to note the contents of the External Auditor's Greater London Authority Audit Planning Report? Somebody has to make a noise, so it's officially happened. Good. And I thank you, EY, for joining us, and you're welcome to leave the chamber. Thanks very much. Okay, that takes us to item 9, internal audit reports. Here we're joined in the chamber by David Esling and Mark Woodley from MOPAC, who run our auditing. David, can I ask you to introduce each report, and then relevant officers can respond as we proceed?
Thank you, Chair. We're going to start with our annual report, which gives my annual opinion on the status of the GLA from the internal audit work that we've undertaken in the past year. I'll take the paper as read, but I'd like to pull out some issues or some aspects of that. As I say, this is my annual opinion. It's based on the assessment of the systems of governance, which includes risk management and the adequacy of the internal control framework. And this is the evaluation of the adequacy of the control that's noted from risk and assurance audits that we've undertaken, and those can take the form of advisory work, and also the results of any investigation to reach that, as I say, that annual opinion. I think it's worth saying that the reviews that we've conducted during this year show that overall the internal control framework of the GLA can be assessed as adequate. And my overall opinion for 24-25 is in the box on in the papers that you have in front of you on page 87. And I won't read it out as it is, but it just is from the testing that we've undertaken in the reviews that this report contains, which we've brought to previous panels. And the work that we've undertaken is taken where we've identified any weaknesses that has been identified with with any of those reviews undertaken, that management have taken and have agreed appropriate corrective actions. So our overall opinion is that the GLA has an adequate internal control environment which is generally operating effectively. Then the paper goes on to list the reviews, as I say, that we've brought to previous panel meetings. I think it's probably worth just highlighting a couple of things. One is the level of recommendations, and I think we've seen an improvement on the implementation of recommendations during this year. There are some reviews that we'll be bringing to future panels, but they will go into next year's opinion. I think that's really all I want to say on the paper. Obviously, open to panel members to ask any questions on that paper, and any thoughts, views welcomed.
Thanks. So a couple of so there was the payroll system audit, but that's been deferred until the autumn. Well, not deferred from the point of view of this committee. We won't see it till the autumn because it's still being looked at.
Yeah, so we're still in draft. We're still engaging with management for the agreed actions because it's a follow-up review. So it's some of the evidence that we need to review that's been subsequently provided as part of that. So that's why that's still in draft, and we'll, as stated, we'll bring that to the October audit panel as a final.
Okay. Perhaps I shouldn't speculate, but I'm going to assume that there are some management actions then, since management actions are being discussed. I know the panel was a bit unhappy with how well that was going previously. I suppose we'll have to await news. I don't know if you can foreshadow.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is part of that process that we're going through. It's taken slightly longer than hopefully that we'd planned. But I think that the key to this is making sure that the actions have been properly unpicked and looked at, which is what the auditors are currently doing.
Okay. Actually, I had a couple of other questions before we move on to the next bit. Did anyone else have any? I don't want to just monopolise all of the time. No. Okay. In that case, I will plough on. So on one of the things that slightly concerned me was on the National Fraud Initiative. It says that the data matching hadn't been completed because of the ongoing impact of the cyber incident, which I think was September last year. So the deadline to do that was March of this year, so 6 months later. But we're still seeing the ramification of that. And so far, only 3% of those have been matched. Yeah, so that's quite behind, I would assume.
Yeah, so this is work obviously that the team are doing with TfL, and yeah, as an impact, it's just delayed getting the information. That's not to say that it won't be completed. It's just taking longer than obviously because of the reasons stated that have had an impact on getting that information and dealing with any matches that have been referred to us from the NFI work.
So roughly how far behind are we? So it was the deadline to get it in was March, and am I right that they got there in April?
Yeah, the team are still working through that. I couldn't give you an accurate. I mean, I can talk to the team tomorrow and get their update on that. But I would hope that to be finalised by the next time we meet and give the outcome of all those matches and obviously the investigative processes that they're going to look into them.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose it's just a symbol of the fact that obviously the cyber attack had some pretty far-reaching impacts, far beyond the sort of customer-facing impact on TfL.
Yes.
Another thing that caught my eye, your DARA counter-fraud team are doing a programme of training to GLA employees involved in grants, which is going to continue. I was interested if you had any more information about what were the sort of lessons or issues emerging from that, where hopefully we're then seeing some improvement.
So the training is very much based on the controls that we would expect to be in place, and so it's the from a counter fraud perspective, it's the work that they've undertaken, the learning of that, and obviously imparting that. So a lot of it, I think we've brought many to many panels, obviously issues that obviously have been have occurred with some grant applications, and it's. The general one usually is when grant money is agreed, it's the follow-up. So I know we've had discussions at panel where we say we look at the appropriateness of the control, because you could put in a number of controls. Obviously, the impact on an organisation receiving the grant could actually prevent them from actually looking for that grant money in the future. So it has to be appropriate. So we'll be looking at things like spot checks, looking for some governance around returns and checking on those, and not obviously ploughing on, giving further grant money should that not be sufficient. So the training is very much based on live experience or previous experience that the team have obviously had to deal with grant issues. So it's and I think it's been really well engaged. So that the few, I think they've done 4 training sessions so far, and they're usually about an hour, but they've tended to overrun to almost 2 hours because of the questions. So there's been some really positive engagement. So that, from our perspective, that's all good. Putting out the issues that we've found in previous years and with previous organisations or other organisations. So there's a lot of learning, and we're imparting that. And it's the teams that have attended those and the individuals have found it really useful.
Good. Yeah, I suppose I was interested in a flavour of what were some of the things being learnt or some of the questions that were coming up, whether there were themes or sort of patterns emerging.
I think the themes generally are it's the appropriateness of challenge. So it's going back to that control. So where you a grant to a smaller organisation, we may say you need separations of duties, but when there's maybe 2 or 3 individuals involved, that might have a major impact on that. So we would be looking at the, I could come from a purist aspect of what would be the best control framework to have in place, but then you have to look at and be pragmatic in that. However, then the teams are looking at how they can then help the organisations and also get information back from those organisations to inform that the grant money is being used as it's been allocated.
Got you. Okay. Another quick question I had. There was the skills boot camps, investigations into skills boot camps funding providers. And I was a bit alarmed that it said DARA had difficulties identifying how claim figures were calculated.
Yeah,
I mean, is that a polite way of saying the paperwork was all a bit chaotic and they didn't quite know what was going on? I don't mean DARA, I mean the organisations.
Yeah, I think there's something in that, but a lot of it is generally just looking at how that information has been retained and covered. So, again, the teams have been working with them to improve those systems. But yeah, some of the information wasn't as readily available as we had hopes.
So do you know roughly how many providers there are? 'Cause obviously there are 2 involved in that investigation. Just want to get a sense of that.
What overall?
Yeah, is it 2 out of 100 or 2 out of 5?
I don't have that information to hand. I think it is more into the tens rather than the 2 into 5, should we say?
Okay.
I don't have the actual figures off the top, but I can come back to you with the actual figures on that.
Okay. And do we know roughly? I know it says attempting to reclaim the ineligible grants. Do you know roughly how much that amounts to?
Again, I'll have to come back to you on that. I know we've reported that to you in the past, and I can't, off the top of my head, remember. I'd have to look back, so apologies for that.
Fair enough. Yeah, if you could, only because we only meet quarterly, so if you could write to us in the interim rather than wait all the way till October, that would be handy. Okay, I think, was that everything that I had on that first bit? Oh, yes, sorry, there was the mention of 2022 programmes officer working for the GLA for 8 weeks, this is the double jobbing.
Yes.
I was curious, was that a new case? Obviously, it's from 2022. Was that a new case, or was that the case?
No, that was the case we'd reported previously.
Okay.
It was just that was the period that occurred in, yeah.
Okay. In that case, I think we can move on to, where are we now? Appendix.
Okay.
2, so that's Appendix 1. Appendix 2, there's GLA Internal Audit Charter.
Yes. So under the public sector internal audit standards, which were in force up to the end of March this year, we're required to provide the charter of our arrangements with all public sector organisations where we're undertaking internal audit. The new global internal audit standards have now been issued. So this is an update on our charter that referred previously to the public sector internal audit standards, taking account of the global standards. What I wanted to do is I'll take the paper as read. As I say, this is something we bring annually anyway. But with the new global standards coming into force, I've been in conversation with CITFA on how the global standards relate to the public sector in the UK. So CITFA have issued an initial guidance on this back in March, but they're now looking at the implications of public sector internal audit on providing and meeting those standards and how they apply to the public sector. So they're going into those to that guidance further. what I plan on doing is I'm due to meet with heads of internal audit and CITFA at the end of July to go into more detail of what we require as auditors from the body to help with public sector internal audit. So I thought I'd just give that to the panel, because going forward there are requirements for the panel as well as part of these standards. So obviously once we've unpicked that fully, then I will share that with you, and we'll look at what we need to do from our perspective, and also from a panel perspective, and also chief officers within the organisations that we provide internal audit with, and what needs to be undertaken. So so that's a long way of saying what these standards are doing is taking account of the new global standards. However, there may be further iterations depending on what comes to those future meetings with CITFA.
Okay, look forward to hearing more. I don't think I have any questions on that. I don't see any questions from the panel. So if we go on to Appendix 3, the GLA Internal Audit Progress Report, July 2025.
Okay, thank you again. So yes, this is our update on the work that's been undertaken since the 8th of March, should I say, to the 27th of June. And as you will see, the following reviews were finalised. So the Creative Industries Portfolio, Digital Experience Unit, the Use and Control of Agency Staff, and that's a follow-up, and then the Core Growth Hub Grant Independent Audit Report for 24-25. Mark will talk to those reports individually in a couple of minutes. Just wanted to highlight there that the counter fraud work. Just wanted to just going back to your question in the annual report. So the NFI work that's been conducted, as I say, we will, because of the implications of what's going forward with that, we will update you in October more fully. But also I wanted to highlight also the GLA Community Counter Fraud Forum, and that's work that our counter fraud officers do with TfL, and it cuts across all the other GLA bodies that between ourselves and TfL, that encompasses, as I say, the GLA family as a whole. And those have provided good information. I mean, we've just touched on grants, so there's a good cohesive view and sharing of information and current fraud issues and trends that are happening across not just the GLA family, but also the public sector within London and obviously nationally. And so it's a good form that's in place. But as I say, I'll take the rest of that update as read, but happy to take any questions that are on that. Otherwise, Mark will talk to the reports.
I don't think so. Yeah, if we move on to... Oh, sorry, you did have a question. Yes, so if we move on, where are we now? Okay. Appendix 4, Core Growth Hub Grant Independent Audit Report 2024-25. Okay,
thank you.
That's what my sheet says.
Okay, thank you. This is not, strictly speaking, a systems audit. This is an annual review that we do to support the £470,000 final claim submitted by the GLA to the Department for Transport and Trade. We examined GLA expenditure incurred on the Core Growth Hub, which supplies support to small and medium-sized enterprises in London. We examined the transactions incurred and found that expended monies covered eligible expenditure as specified in the Department for Business and Trade grant offer letter, and all the activities were completed by the 31st of March 2025 and paid for by the 31st of May 2025. The GLA had maintained adequate records to support the claim for payment of the grant, and the total grant spend records confirm that the grant had been spent in full. Thank you.
Nope, I don't think we have any questions on that. Thanks very much, Mark. That seems quite clear. So shall we move on to Appendix 5, Use and Control of Agency Staff follow-up report?
Okay. We reviewed the use and control of agency staff in June 2024 and concluded an adequate assurance. 6 management actions were agreed to improve the management of key risks that were identified. Of the 6 management actions, we found that 2 had been fully implemented and 4 had been partly implemented. In particular, we found that guidance for the day-to-day management of agency staff has been put in place to clearly define the purpose and requirements when hiring agency workers. Approval for temporary agency worker forms are now embedded in the Reed XMS system with mandatory fields to ensure information fields for hiring requests are completed. The People Board review agency staff tenure across the directorates. while approvals are required, there is a risk that limited information is submitted for agency extension requests. The resourcing team now review timesheet data to monitor staff exceeding 48 hours, with queries reported to the head of strategic resourcing to raise with hiring managers. Guidance has been provided on the day-to-day management of agency workers, which clearly outlines the responsibility for hiring managers to monitor staff working over 48 hours. But however, while responsibility is clearly outlined, the procedures for hiring managers to check whether agency workers have opted out of the working time directive is labour intensive and not clearly recorded within the XMS system. Following a review of a claim made by a member of agency staff for a certificate of sponsorship, there is a need to define policies for hiring and the approval of the payment of visas, certificates of sponsorship for the employment of foreign workers. The resourcing team now collate data from XMS to inform the People Board of agency worker totals, tenure and costs across the Directorate. The reporting provides organisational-wide monitoring and costed insights to support decision-making. However, no clear plans have been agreed to reduce agency staff over 18 months. And since the original review, the total number of agency staff has marginally decreased by 10. However, the average length of contract increased by 14 weeks, and the total costs increased by £714,000. Discussions and actions at People Board are shared with HR business partners, although no clear actions for reducing agency workers are in place. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we probably do have some questions on this. So shall I? I think there are some. Perhaps we'll move on in a moment to some questions about the sort of overall picture with agency staff. Because obviously, it's quite a large contract in total, amounting to about £9 million. But this business of the fraudulent expenses claim, was it £1,239? I'd like to start with that, if I may. I suppose what alarms me is that it seems to be sort of multiple steps of can I say dishonesty? I don't know. Questionable behaviour. So first of all, we've got sponsorship of an immigration visa for agency staff, which I assume we would not normally do. And then secondly, because we wouldn't normally do it, there wasn't a box to tick to say that that's what it was, so it was put down, shall I say dishonestly, as a flight when it was clearly known to not be a flight. And then thirdly, because the expenses limit is £400 and this was £1,339, it was obviously the classic dubious expenses claim strategy of £400 and then £400 and then £400 and then £39. So that's at least three different stages of questionable behaviour. So I suppose my questions are really out of all of that. Obviously, we've got the auditors who've picked this up. What are the actions being taken on each of those three? I don't know if Diane, if you're the right person to help us with that.
Yes, thank you. So, I mean, I think we have made much more clarification on the guidance of what people can do, and there is increased monitoring of that now by the resourcing team. The new head of resourcing is just sat behind you, actually, who has just joined us today. So it is an area that we are looking at. In addition to that, we have talked about system changes. Obviously, there is a commercial process going on at the moment where there is a retender across the group looking at how we're the supply of agency workers. So the area around the system controls that we want will be part of that tender as well. So we have taken interim steps to try and make the improvements that were needed and increase monitoring. But one of the things we do want to do is make that more systematised so we can pick that up quicker rather than the manual oversight that's needed for now.
Okay, I mean that obviously all sounds positive, but what concerns me? I mean, let's take step 2 that I described. So somebody put into the system an expenses claim for travel by flight when they knew perfectly well that that isn't what it was. So do you know whether that was somebody at Reed who was trying to pull a fast one on us? Was it someone at the GLA who submitted that? Was it maybe someone at Reed who'd been suggested by someone at the GLA that would be a way to put this through? I'm just thinking if we have a £9 million contract with somebody and if they're trying to submit dubious expenses.
My understanding was that these claims do take place, but they should go through the GLA's payment process. And I think my understanding was that that's not what happened here. The individual made the payment and then the claim was made through the system. So I think that was part of the problem about not having a weakness. And also I think on the READ system, the total amount that could be claimed had to be £400. That was the limit. So that's why they had to cut it into 3, I think it was, different payments. So I think there's a process there, but I think somewhere along the line the process sort of slipped a bit here with regard to that payment.
Is it slipping a bit if you put it down as travel via flight and it's actually visa sponsorship?
Yeah, well, I think that was probably...
I feel like if I'd done that and the journalist read that I'd done that, they probably wouldn't go, oh, Neil Garrett slipped a bit there.
Yeah, well, I don't know the full breakdown of how these claims are coded off the top of my head, but I'm assuming that was probably the most reasonable place to put it at that time. But as I say, I think what's coming now is that there's a policy being introduced about how to manage these processes, which wasn't in place at the time that when we carried out the internal audit.
That's correct. And in addition to that, we've now got oversight of it, so that can be seen on the system, which we couldn't do before. So that is the change that's been made.
So we would then sponsor a visa application for an agency worker? Because that was the first of my 3 questionable steps. The first step is that we are apparently possibly sponsoring a visa application for an agency worker.
I'm not sure how many sponsorships we're actually doing. That's a piece of work I would need to take away. So I'd need to take that away to actually have a look at whether or not we are sponsoring. I think I saw it as a query. I actually don't know if we are, and if so, how many. So I'm happy to take that away.
Okay. So just to have interest, sorry, I know you want to come in a second. So my last question, abusing my chair's privilege. Do we know when this all came to light or when these incidents happened, which I suppose those are not necessarily the same time?
I think this came out of a sample that we did because one of the issues in the original audit was evidence to support claims that were being made. So what we did was we picked a sample. Just so happened that one was one of the sample that we picked. So that's how we identified it at the time. So. Yeah. Okay.
So do we know when did it come to light?
Well, it came to light when we did the testing. So I don't know exactly the time period for the claim, but I would imagine it would have been sort of fairly recently, I would have thought. So
okay. You don't know when this came to light. Okay. Krupesh.
Thank you. Actually, I'm not too concerned about the sponsorship issue because if someone is going for a job through the agency in an interim role, and it is, doesn't have the way the visa system is changed. You need to have the sponsor to have the employment opportunity coming forward. And if that person's best qualified for the job, then you will have situations where the situation can arise. My question is more about the process that was used for the £400 and £39. Was there an alternative process at the time that should have been raised? I note the recommendations and saying in future the process will come forward, but was there an alternative way of putting this forward that wasn't a flight expense that would have spoken clearly to what this was trying to achieve?
So I think the answer is we didn't have visibility of it until the system changes were made. So I think it was the only way it could have been put through. It could have been put through at the time, which is why the system changes were subsequently made.
So I think Assembly Member Garrett then referred to, was this a case of they've got some sort of process has gone through in terms of fitting someone with a role that was filled through an agency staff, and then was it a question of how can we make it work after the process? Or, yeah, you're nodding, Diane.
We weren't, I was going to say, one of the challenges, we weren't involved in the investigation, but I think the point you're making is there was a limit to what they could submit. So from this point of view, GLA didn't have oversight until the system changes have been made. So I'm not completely sure what happened in terms of the investigation.
Yeah, I think the process broke down because the individual made the claim themselves, when, strictly speaking, it should have gone through the GLA process. Now, I'm not entirely sure. I can probably go back and double check through the investigation information and get a bit more on that side of things. But that seemed to be how it had slipped. The process has slipped. It should have gone through the proper expenses claim, the proper process with the GLA paying it. So.
And then just so working backwards then, so do you know if any investigation did take place in terms of matching application process to person qualified to job and process?
We didn't carry out a full review of that whole process, but we do have an audit of recruitment and selection this year, and I think this will be an area that we'll have a look at when we do that audit. So we didn't go through the whole process of sponsorship and visas during this review. We were purely concentrating on the claim that was being made rather than the actual whole process.
And will that be looked at in the round then?
Yeah, well, we can pick that up as part of that recruitment selection audit, pick it up and have a look at it.
Sure.
Assembly Member Wilson.
Thank you. So just looking at the table on page 3 of the report, the change in numbers of staff and length of average length of contract for agency, and so the average is 54.6 weeks. What's the longest member of staff that's on an agency contract? Do you know?
We haven't got the figures to hand, but I don't think it's any longer than a couple of years, I would say, but I'm not sure.
Yes, some of the longer standing ones are particularly, you'll be aware that we are transitioning our technical services over to TfL, and there has been a delay in that because the original transfer was due to take place last year. So we have retained some of the technical staff for a longer period than was originally envisaged. So this is one of the challenges that we've got, where we know that we're transitioning a service, so there's no point bringing in permanent members of staff who won't have roles in the longer term. So we actually have larger numbers in the IT shared services transition team and the technical group of agency workers, and they have been there for a longer period than would normally be our policy.
Transition's complete, we'd expect this figure to come down.
Correct. So the transition is due to take place this year. We've provisioned for the fact that those numbers will reduce significantly once that transition has taken place.
Thanks. Actually, just returning for a moment just to the expense claim. The concern you mentioned, Mark, that obviously it came to light through a dip sample of about 5 or 6, I think it was.
Yeah.
And obviously that raises the sort of tip of the iceberg question of, are there others? So I suppose it's maybe a question for Diane or maybe Faye about, roughly, do we know how many expenses claims are being made by agency staff, and what the sort of magnitude of those is, and whether this has triggered a piece of work to go back and look at all of those and see if there's anything else that, more systematically that should be looked at, as opposed to just this one that was found by happenstance?
You audit team did a wider audit on this, didn't you?
Yeah, I was going to say, and part of our ongoing fraud, and we got data analytics as part of that review, as part of the methodology that we can use to do this. We will be doing a more in-depth sample across a number of areas, but because we've got new data analytics that we can use, that's an area that we will focus on from that sample. Obviously, you could extrapolate that and only find one, but you could extrapolate and find 50. But through the data analytics, we'll be able to do a almost 100% sample check of those and pull out any ones that need to have further review. But as I say, in our plan this year, we've got that as part of an improvement in what we can do, rather than moving away from sample testing to almost 100% testing. So that's an area we can utilise, and we will do this on these in these areas.
So that would pick up, obviously, I suppose there are 2 red flags for this. One was the classic multiple claims for one thing ruse, and then secondly there was the fact that the invoice or the receipt or whatever it was didn't match the claimed category. So that system would check those sorts of things.
So it would pick out, So you would look at from an audit perspective, you would be looking. I mean, you've identified it already. Those claims that are just under the thresholds and how regular those are occurring. That would identify in that case, those that are occurring like that, and also it would pick out on those other issues. So we as part of that sample testing, and we've been using that across some of our other clients and had some quite interesting results that that have led to proper improvements into the process. So it's a good, valuable thing, and as I say, we'll be doing that as part of the GLA plan this year.
Okay, so perhaps this is my view as a layman, but it seems to me that it's a good thing that the audit people have found it, but it's a better thing if it doesn't happen in the first place, because the normal business processes pick these things up routinely. So I suppose that's really what I'm asking about is, within, having had the auditors come in and go, oh, we've got this problem, what then is the response in the sort of business as usual area? And I don't know if this is one for you, Faye, or Diane, about your reaction in terms of, they've found a problem, this is what we're going to do to check if this is a more widespread problem.
In terms of our action, this is what David's here to help us to do in terms of, so it's why that's on the audit plan in future. But of course, the key control here that we just wouldn't want to forget is someone's agreed these things. You've got a manager who's agreed that. So that's the key, in any of these systems, that's the key control that needs to be focused on. So it doesn't matter how many times you do, someone's agreed it. So that's the area of focus, really.
Exactly that. So we've talked about detective control. What Faye's just mentioned there is a preventive control, and that somebody has signed those off. I mean, and there is a question there. Then you're talking about, I raised it earlier about that segregation or separation of duties. That is what you have that there, the management processes to sign off those claims. So that's something we'd be looking at. Is that a failure of the control, or is there something else there? So again, part of that audit work would be unpicking and unpacking some of that.
Right, so I suppose that comes back. I don't want to. The question I asked, or the point I made earlier, perhaps, Faye, was obviously either someone at Reed has submitted these expenses knowing there's let's say at best, a question mark over them, or possibly someone at the GLA has submitted these or signed them off knowing that there's something suspicious about them, or possibly someone at the GLA has said to someone at Reed, just submit it like that. That's probably the easiest thing to do. So have you got to the bottom of which of those, if any, or maybe some other scenario is actually what happened?
I haven't got to the bottom of that, but what would have happened in this instance is the individual making the claim would have submitted the form and then a manager would have signed it off. So that would have been the actual process. And my understanding is that it's kind of a misunderstanding around, because we do pay visa payments, whether it's for agency or not. I've seen others paid in different ways. So we do. Okay. So I think someone thought this was genuine expense and just thought this was a way to do it as opposed to genuinely for. But this is why we need the additional work that David's got to check the breadth of that problem. I think it's just we do pay for visas. This was just an understanding if this was the best way to do it as opposed to really understanding the controls in the system, trying to get around them as opposed to.
And some of the recommendation, I mean, talking about the policy and the process and the improvements in that to make it the clarification that people understand what they can sign up against and what can be claimed. So with that clarity, that helps a manager signing off something to be absolutely sure that it's a legitimate expense.
Yeah. I suppose it's just such a big red flag in my mind that a manager... would that be a manager at Reed or a manager at GLA, that person's
GLA.
manager? With the GLA. So, obviously, I don't know, it's such a classic thing, isn't it, to sign off an expense that's like, we're only allowed £400. How do we sneak £1,236 through? I don't know. Perhaps I'm overly paranoid. That just seems to me to be a bigger red flag than...
From our perspective, just going back to reiterating that's part of the work that we're going to undertake. So yes, you will the work that we'd be undertaking would pick out those trends, and I think we call that a trend where you've got those multiple, just under the threshold payments going through, and and so in some cases they will be totally legitimate. Others maybe that's the way of pushing it through to get money through quickly. Others maybe more questionable, but that piece of work would be able to pick those up, and from our perspective we can take further investigative undertakings on those that have been identified.
I've got two more questions. Just quickly, what's the timeline for that piece of work?
So that's something we were looking at doing, I think second quarter, but we're looking at the data, so it's getting the access to the data to then do the analytics of that data. So as soon as we can start to look into that, we can start doing that piece of work.
Okay.
But I mean, that's something we can start looking at, fairly soon and pull it forward. But I mean, I can give an update at the next panel whether we've begun that work or where we've got to with the data. So we give you updates as part of our that update report.
Great, thanks very much. And super quick final question, Dan. You mentioned a piece of work about getting tabs on the sponsorships for visa sponsorships. Do you know roughly what the timeline for that piece of work is?
I'll time in so that comes into the next report that David's bringing.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Assemblymember Baker, I think you wanted. Okay. Well, whichever.
Yeah. So this is I mean, I know we're talking about agency staff, but if, let's say, the equivalent happened where it was a GLA directly employing someone, is there a system in place that allows that direct sponsorship, or is this a separate system, and the issues emerge because it has come from agency?
So my understanding, because I've seen some of these payments go through different payment route, so there is a system. It's agreed when that sort of transaction happens. It's agreed between HR and TfL, whatever, because HR is in TfL's HR, for that to be payment to be made, and it's not paid through this route. It's paid on a Visa card, on a GLA, because it's got to be paid in a certain way. You can't just send a cheque to the immigration, but it's paid for it. And that's how I've seen it, because my team see every single payment that's made on payment cards. So that's how I've got, what's this? So since I've been here, I've seen one, possibly two, definitely one I've seen since I've been here of that type. So not seen a significant amount of those payments coming through, but they've been through payment cards in the 9 months I've been here.
Did you have a question as well? But
I did, yes. Yeah. So can I just clarify, XMS, is that a read system that you have access to? Yeah,
that's correct.
Because what strikes me is a number of these, in fact, all the ones that are subject to follow-up investigations and findings are related to I think the difficulties of having controls that cover two organisations. So you've got the ensuring that there are proper business cases is about being able to submit it on their system. There's a problem about working time directive, which I'll come back to, and this about I think this about the expenses also has that aspect as well. So how confident are you that you're going to be able to re-tender on a basis that you get a system or get a relationship that allows those controls to be adequately covered effectively across two organisations? That's always going to be a bit of a risk, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's a group tender which is going through. So it's managing everybody's within the group's requirements for agency workers. So it's a group collab project. Yeah. So, part of the requirement is that we are able to get access and information that we need, which is why we've got a number of these actions that are specific to the system that we've got. Yeah. Obviously, that's a commercial tender at the moment that is going on in the background, and yes, so we're waiting for the outcome of that to be able to make sure that we've got all of our requirements built into the system. Yeah.
So, because for instance, the further agreed actions on the thing about the business cases was, we will request that Reed amends the heading on XMS. I mean, we should be able to say, you have to, this is core to us. So is that part of what we've requested from our point of view in terms of the re-tender? Things like that we can basically...
There's an element
demand's
of
a strong word, but you know what I mean. Say, look, we're paying the bills. You need to do this.
Yes, absolutely. And there's an element of we need a system in place to make sure we've got business cases we're requiring a business case, as well as having the system that's got that logged in as well. Yes. So, I mean, part of the bolster here was making sure that every request for agency staff is bolstered with a business case as well. But actually, you're right. What we want is a system, and the opportunity to do it is now in the tender process.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it was really about what's driving the lack of control rather than the specificity on that case. And just on the working time directive issue, apologies if I missed that. Is that still so the further actions are June 2025? Is that updated? Apologies if I've missed that specifically. Are we now able to understand exactly who who has opted out and what hours they're doing. And of concern to me is that that's presumably a different regime for our direct staff, because we don't automatically ask people to opt out of the working time directive, do we?
No, we don't.
No.
That's not an automatic request
No.
for GLA staff.
Is that of concern? Because then we've basically got a bunch of staff who, because if they're automatically opted out, then that can drive some unhelpful managerial and workplace behaviours.
The fact that they've opted out doesn't necessarily mean that we are requiring them to operate much longer than the 48 hours. So it is. I didn't quite realise it was a default that they're operating out, and it's the default that they're operating out. Yeah. So there is an element of we need to monitor and manage what hours that they're doing, and now we've got the ability to do that through the system, which I think we hadn't necessarily done before. So there's some of this about the continuing checking on that.
So I can comment as someone who has got an agency person who was working in that situation, and that situation's changed from about a month ago. We were asked as much, because I think these sometimes just happen because obviously financially it's beneficial also for that individuals working longer hours, yeah. And we're always very busy, so there's always, we could all be working very long hours, we're working long hours. So in actual fact, what has to happen now is those times need to be agreed in advance, a week in advance. So rather than it just happening by default, as a manager, I've been instructed that we need to agree in advance if there are hours over and above call.
And is that something I think
that must be a system.
And that the hours of agency versus, obviously if they're doing temporary work to deliberately have been brought in to cover a particular issue or gap, then that might end up being additional hours. But overall, we shouldn't have agency staff there to work very long hours for various reasons. Is that being monitored to make sure that it's effectively the same between our directly employed staff and agency?
I'm not sure about that particular control. All I can say is that we have to agree in advance. So effectively, it's an active decision for that agency person to have to wait to work longer hours for a specific period of time or for a specific action. We wouldn't genuinely expect people to be in that situation on an ongoing basis. In terms of our own staff, I don't know if that forms any part of the work strategy or anything, but there isn't a direct, so I'm aware, direct comparison between agency and non-agency staff as a work stream that we do.
No, the other thing I would add is not all agency staff charge by hours. So particularly ones at senior levels are invoicing by day. So it's not relevant. It's not the extra hours incentive isn't there for some of the more senior individuals. So particularly all the ones that are on my list are invoicing by day, not by hour. And as Faye is saying, where people are invoicing by hour, that's now got to be agreed in advance.
But there are other risks of people doing unmonitored long hours and breaking the working time directive, is my point. It's not just a financial risk. It's
yes.
In terms of the functioning of the organisation and the safety of that person doing that job. So it's just a concern if we've basically got a subset of people doing work for us where we don't have full sight and understanding, or we might be driving the idea that they are doing it. The working time directive's there for a reason, basically. Yes,
absolutely. That's up to those the person who knows what's happening is to manage those individuals, and so we've set an expectation of those managers that they should be managing, ensuring the well-being of our staff, which is about well-being as well as not just about working a certain number of hours, but making sure their well-being.
But people who are working long hours don't always make the correct decisions. I think that's the point. I'm not necessarily making a well-being point, although it is important. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Okay. Back to you.
Thanks. Just on this point, I was not quite sure what to make of this. So there's discussion about reducing the number of agency staff or reducing our spend, and obviously that's gone up from, 8.2 million to 9 million, 8.3 million to 9 million, something like that. And then I suppose this I found, wasn't quite sure what to make of it. In paragraph 5.5, it says, while directors have informally discussed plans to reduce agency workers over 18 months, no formal plans have been agreed, and there's a risk that insights from performance reporting are not being translated into actions to reduce the use of agency staff. That is, I suppose, a very diplomatic way of saying, do we really have a plan to do this, or is it just a nice thing that we're talking about possibly doing one day, would be how I might phrase it. So is it is it definitely a thing that we're trying to do, or is it a thing we're just talking about doing?
It is, but I go back to the fact that, so I think the point I would make is that we've got services that are transitioning. So our intention will be there is a reason we've got agency staff in that particular area. So we have discussed at the People Board that we have got a number of staff who are supporting the permanent staff who are going to TUPE transfer over, and there is a transitional piece of work where we've got agency staff. We do have clear guidelines that there is a limit of time that we should have agency staff, but we have accepted that the position with some of these has gone on longer, partly because of the cyber incident. There are some areas where we've got specialist skills that we've brought in that we don't have within the organisation. And there are some areas where we do need to make improvement to our recruitment so that we are bringing people in first time and quickly, rather than having to rely on agency and temporary staff to bolster that part. So it is a strand that we are looking at broadly. What I would say is, when we're talking just about agency staff, there is a broader strategy that we've got to look at, which is getting the right people in quickly through our recruitment, getting them onboarded quickly, and reducing people's need for agency staff. Once we've addressed some of those barriers, I think we're in a much better place to put a more focus on what our position is on the agency staff themselves.
Okay. I suppose, I don't know, I think if I were given the task, I've never worked in HR, so perhaps you can tell. If I were given the task of looking at that, though, I think my starting point, given what you've just said, would be to say, you know, we've got this overall objective of reducing length of time for agency staff. We've got certain reasons in certain parts of the organisation where we can't do it. So my plan is not one overall, you know, one size fits all plan. It's a plan of parts. You know, so for the technology group, this is the plan. For, I don't know, HR, this is the plan for different. So, but that would still be a plan, and it would allow you to say, okay, these three areas, let's say, we can't do anything about for now because of the reasons you've just said, such as the transition that's happening in IT. But these other areas don't have those concerns, and so we can implement a plan here. I mean, that just seems... I mean, that's what a plan would look like, isn't it, to achieve what you just described?
There isn't a formal written plan, but what you can see through the numbers is throughout the People Board, we are taking action to slowly reduce the numbers. So, in fact, in March, we'd reduce the numbers down to 90. So you can see a very active trend of reviewing agency contracts and reducing agency contracts, replacing with permanent staff or fixed-term contracts where that's possible. So I think if you're saying, do we have a written plan? No, but it is a key action that we take at the corporate management team, that we are constantly reviewing the agency staff in our areas and taking an active decision to reduce them where possible.
Okay. So 90. So actually, in the report here it says 104, and you said now it's down to 90.
It's down. The report as of March 25 had it down to 90, which is the workforce report, which is due to come to Oversight Committee.
Okay. I suppose I think if I think mathematically, if it's gone from 114 people to 104 people, just using the numbers here, so we're down, I don't know, about 8% or something, but the cost has gone up and the average number of weeks has gone up. That suggests to me that what we've done is got rid of lower paid, shorter term people, but we've still got higher paid, longer term people. That's the pattern that we're seeing. So that's sort of the opposite of reducing long term people.
And I'm going to say digital and are fairly specialist skills that we've retained for a particular reason. So I think it will be... the report is going to change as time goes on, but actually this is perhaps reflecting that we do want to be bringing in permanent staff, and we are particularly focused on starting to bring in short-term and very specialist areas where it's difficult to recruit externally.
Okay, I don't think I had any other... Oh, we do have another question. Somebody remember Harani?
Yeah, sorry, just something that prompted me. So just where you have planned exit, so where it's someone moving on to a new role or retiring, so it's usually 1 month or 3 month notice depending on level of role. So from the point where someone's given their notice, we know they're going to leave, and there's no issues with funding for the role, so it's a like-for-like replacement we're looking for. How quickly or how quickly does an advert for that role be? How quickly is it put up?
It will depend on the manager. The role can be advertised fairly quickly as soon as the manager has decided that they're replacing that role in a like-for-like basis. And there are different means by which you can recruit. So you can recruit internally, you can recruit through the group, you can recruit externally. There are different means by which you can recruit to replace a role.
Okay, but regardless of how that is, so if the manager had chosen to go through internal or external,
yeah,
could they get an advert up quite quickly?
Yes.
Okay. A matter of days?
I would say a sort of a week or two you can get an advert up.
Okay. So.
Okay, I have to say that matches my experience when we had to do exactly that. So no complaints. Since I've been grumbling, I will say I'll end that item on a positive note that is exactly how it worked. It was pretty swift. No more questions on Appendix 5? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. So that takes us to our final part of the internal audit report, which is Appendix 6, the Digital Experience Unit Budget and Project Management.
Okay, we reviewed the processes in place to provide assurance on the control, design and compliance of the Digital Experience Unit IT budget and performance management control framework. We concluded that there was an adequate assurance that the control framework is adequately designed, although some controls are not operating effectively to mitigate key system risks. We made 3 high-risk and 2 medium-risk actions were identified and agreed with management. In particular, we found that a Digital Experience Unit roles and responsibilities framework is in place that links to key requirements of project and budget operations and forms the basis for the delivery of designated programme work streams. The Digital Experience Unit is required to follow the overall GLA portfolio management framework, which sets out the overall intent, structure, governance and processes for managing programmes and projects. We found this framework addressed a range of expected governance and control areas and provided a satisfactory basis to provide an overarching level of governance. There is a risk management control framework in place which is designed to identify, quantify, document and manage project-based risks. A documented Digital Experience Unit management reporting system has been implemented that incorporates a number of key reporting mechanisms. We found that there was no agreed and communicated digital data and technology strategy in place. Whilst a draft strategy has been produced, there is scope to improve the overall strategic management framework. There is an absence of a governance process designed to inform and prioritise Digital Experience Unit projects and associated resourcing. There's no system in place at present to allocate Digital Experience Unit staffing costs to individual projects to provide the basis to quantify the overall real cost of a project. Furthermore, there is an absence of an overall GLA programme and project budget setting and monitoring framework in which the Digital Experience Unit can integrate regarding overall cost management. There is scope to provide a more granular and documented project management methodology to support the consistency of project management governance processes and adherence to key project controls. And finally, there's no comprehensive business case format and template that is fully aligned to the overall HM Treasury Green Book guidance on how to appraise policies, programmes and projects. Thank you.
Sorry, Assemblymember Harani.
Thank you. Just a quick one really on the lack of digital data and technology strategy. So has there ever been sort of a previous version or maybe a baseline version of document that can be referred to that might be out of date? Is it a strategy that hasn't been replaced or just none? Yeah, there hasn't been any in any case ever.
I'm not aware there was a previous strategy for the GLA.
I don't know.
No. So, I mean, I've been here since July last year. I've not seen a data and digital strategy before this version.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think you have any other questions on that. Okay, thank you very much. Let me go back to my script. So can I ask the panel to note the contents of recent internal audit reports attached to the report at appendices 1 to 6?
Yep.
Good, excellent. We're now somewhat on the home stretch. Item 10, Corporate Risk Register. We now move to the Corporate Risk Register. Are there any points that members wish to officers to consider ahead of the next 6-monthly refresh and update? Okay, in that case, can I ask the panel to note the Corporate Risk Register?
Yep.
Good. Item 11, Draft Annual Governance Statement 2024-25. Do members have any questions or comments? I will take the silence as a no. Item 12, monitoring of expenses and taxable benefits. We now move on to monitoring of expenses and taxable benefits for the Mayor, elected members and senior staff. Do members have any questions or comments? Nope. In that case, can we note the taxable benefits and expenses incurred by the Mayor, London Assembly members and senior staff during the period 1st of April 25 to the 31st of May 25? Good, excellent, well noted. That brings us to 13, date of next meeting. The next meeting of the panel is scheduled for the 22nd of October 2025 at 10 a.m. here in the chamber in City Hall. There is no urgent business. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is now closed.